Hey guys, Jesus is here. Here I am going to talk about the 7 days of creation, the 7 days of creation account and Genesis. Genesis chapter 1, continuing through the first 3 verses of chapter 2, tells a 7 days of creation story. But is that story a documentary that recalls reality? Or is it an unscientific story or myth designed by someone to give an answer to ignorant ancient people? That question has long been debated. Is the Genesis 7 days of creation account literal, and is it true? Actually, yes, it is true, it is reality. How do we know? There are 2 ways, or reasons, that we know. First, the Bible tells us in a way that can only be disbelieved, once we understand that so much in Genesis 1, later in that book, and throughout the Bible can be proven, if we turn away from clear evidence that is stronger than what is needed to convict in a court of law. Second, basic knowledge of science and logic prove that what is stated about creation in Genesis chapter 1 has to have occurred within a short period of time. At most it could not have been more than a few weeks or months, so since God says it occurred in 1 week, who are we to disagree? See the tab for Genesis 1 and the pages linked to it for more details, including the full wording of Genesis chapter 1. What follows is a short summary. Genesis 1 tells us that God created certain things on earth over 6 days. Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, tell us about the 7th day of creation, but that is not needed to make the points on this page. Background, perspectives of this website. First, a couple of background items to give you the perspective of this website. To be fair, there are other ways that Genesis 1 has been interpreted by scholars. But what is presented on GenesisCreationProof.com represents a comprehensive approach that withstands objections and seems correctly scientific, since science has set up some bogus tests or requirements that are not logical or sustainable, thus probably fitting what the Apostle Paul spoke of as science falsely so-called. First, Genesis chapter 1 verse 2 does not immediately follow verse 1, in the sense of being the same second, des, or even year. We do not know how much time or what all events occurred between Genesis 1 to 1 and Genesis 1 to 2, but it was a lot, and could possibly have involved the billions of years that some scientists speculate. More explanation about Genesis 1, verses 1 and 2, is given at a link under the Genesis 1 tab. Secondly, not only is evolution untrue, some who support its teaching know that it is a lie. Next, Genesis chapter 1, verses 5, 8, 13, 19, 23, and 31 all end with the words "and the evening and the morning were the underscore day." Just fill in the blanks, in order, with first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. To the ancient Hebrews in the nation of Israel before Jesus Christ came in the flesh, and to the Orthodox Jews today, the literal, 24-hour day started at sunset and was composed of the evening and the morning. Each continued from those beginnings, up to the next, that is, the evening began the day and continued throughout the night. Then, the morning began and continued through the afternoon, to the next evening, to finish one day. It is thus clear that the Bible says in Genesis 1 that 6 literal, 24-hour, days were involved between sometime in verse 2, or in verse 3, and the end of verse 31. What about the creation of light? Now, honest questions can arise, such as how there could be an evening and a morning for each of days 1, 2, and 3, with verses 3 through 5 saying that God created light, but it is not until verses 14 through 19 that the sun and moon were made, and that was during the 4th day. Good question, right? Remember that the story is told in a way that makes sense to one who has the perspective of being on the earth, looking out or up toward what later could be seen as sky and heavens. And remember the assumption, which is not really the best word, conclusion from other facts is a better way to state it, that the earth was not just then, that is, that same week, created, and the sun and moon were not just created, either. So, a logical conclusion is that when the earth was, or, more likely, became without form and void, in verse 2, the earth, moon, and possibly also the sun were not a pretty sight and were wastelands. More explanation is given under the Genesis 1 tab. Thus, the sun and moon, though made in verses 14 through 19, existed previously but were perhaps rehabbed or renewed and repositioned on day 4. All this means that, in verse 3, God was probably letting different light begin to shine on earth, after near or total darkness, or he was beginning on day 1, to clear up some of the darkness so it could be determined that light did exist out in space, but it was not clear as a bell until the 4th day. Since God is light I John 1-5, either or some other explanation is possible. 6 days of creation in Genesis 1. Therefore, we can now list a brief summary of what was created on each of the first 6 days in the 7 days of creation account in Genesis 1-3:31. Day 1, light, day and night. Day 2, firmament, or heavens, with water above it and below it. Day 3, waters separated so dry land appears, vegetation created. Day 4, sun, moon, and stars become visible from earth. Day 5, sea-dwelling creatures and flying creatures created. Day 6, land animals and then mankind created. Were the 6 days literal 24-hour days? Besides the fact that God said these things occurred on those 6 days, we know that they had to occur within a few weeks or months' time at the absolute longest, because the life forms created on days 3, 5, and 6 are interdependent. If all of them had not been created at approximately the same time, some would have died off before the others could support them. And that is a basic reason why evolution could not have occurred. Even though it is not possible that billions of years could somehow result in a tree or a monkey, or a man evolving, it is all the more astronomically impossible that chance could result in all of them, and everything else needed for them to exist together, evolved. Why not take that one step further, take the matter of sex? Although not possible that a single, male or female, monkey or goat evolved, how could male and female monkeys, goats, sheep, dogs, cats, squirrels, llamas, horses, chimpanzees, rats, armadillos, skunks, bison, bears, jackrabbits, and mankind all have evolved near enough to the same time that they all exist, did they?